Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good evening. Today again we are going to talk about Pakistan-Afghanistan relations. As you know that our delegation was in Turkey, and 4 days of extensive discussion was held with the Afghan Taliban regime, but unfortunately the talks broken down. Today we got news that especially from the defense minister, he was talking to one of the Pakistani TV channel. He said that the Turkey has requested the Pakistani delegation to stay back and resume the talks from where they were being broken down. So let us see that what is going to happen, because Pakistan has clearly told the Afghan Taliban regime that Pakistan will not accept any cross-border terrorism from Afghanistan or any group that is creating law and order situation inside Pakistan. We are going to discuss about it. I have a very prominent guest with me, Dr. Maria Sultan. She's a Director General SASI, and she is expert on the regional issue. Thank you very much, Ms. Maria. Please kindly tell me that why the Taliban has become arrogant, and despite the fact that Pakistan has been extending all kind of assistance and help to Afghanistan for over more than 4 decades, but the attitude of the Taliban has really disappointed the Pakistani nation as well as the policymaker here in Islamabad.
There are a number of reasons for that, but first and foremost, we need to understand what is it that we're dealing with. We are dealing with the Taliban regime, whatever you can call them, because that is essentially a group of Taliban leaders, most of them Guantanamo Bay detainees, who have come back, usurped power and negotiated their way through power. These are the ones who were not the ones who were just essentially just dealing with everything foremost in terms of fighting the war on ground, but they were the people who were politically in charge in one way or the other. Secondly, after the fall of Kabul, unfortunately, the Afghan state did not get the traction what they were expecting. They were not recognized by anybody in the world. Now, barely Russia and India have recognized them. China is maintaining relations, but not essentially, going ahead with it. It's likewise Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar and Turkey are also having relations, but they have not formally recognized the Taliban regime or this faction or this interim government as a government which is actually representative of the people of Afghanistan. Now, this means that this group, which is in charge, has got a survival issue which it has to deal with. First survival is how do they ensure that they can continue to have access to money? And that access to money, unfortunately, in their mind, is linked towards terrorism. They think this is the only saleable commodity which will give them leverage, pressure, and also a great bargaining chip. Now, this has been pretty much their strategy. But you see, there are two problems here. First problem is this, that this time the Taliban regime, the factions, whoever you call them, are not actually doing this for fighting and liberating the people of Afghanistan. They are doing this in terms of actually abating and sponsoring terrorism across board, trans-border, on the behest of not just themselves, but on the behest of another regional country. And in this case, that regional country happens to be India. Second question is the fact of having continuous access to dollars, continuous access to someone who would lobby for them in terms of the United Nations. And we saw that when Muttaqi was visiting India, India actually lobbied for them. Not only lobbied for his travel, but also lobbied for everything else. So this, they believe, is their ticket out towards normalization. They believe that terrorism is something, because it has been successful, that this will bow Pakistan in terms of backwards, in terms of, getting the attention they require. They got the attention, no doubt. The casualties which we have suffered since 2021 to 2025, they have got 100% attention of Pakistani armed forces now. Now, that's the problem. It's not just the Pakistani armed forces, it's also the people of Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, and most importantly, a national decision that we will not allow terrorism to be something which will allow to become a state policy against Pakistan. So Pakistan has responded, and that response is something which they're not willing to take into consideration. And along with that is the other unspoken part of the entire Pak Afghan issue. That is the issue of the Afghan refugees, the issue of people's going back to Afghanistan, and most importantly, of actually maintaining an effective border management mechanism on 2,600 kilometers borders, which is linked, of course, to the Afghan transit trade and its efficacy as a major tool for trade between Pakistan and Afghanistan and the world.
Okay, Ms. Baria, do you think that what we have been hearing that the Taliban, they say that do you think that they don't have a control, or they don't have a any kind of influence on the various groups that are operating from Afghanistan, that is BLA, TTP, ISKP, all these groups, they don't have any influence on them?
Well, according to some research which we did at our institute as well, and also with international terrorism experts, there are almost 22 terror groups which are operating under the direct patronage of the Afghan Interior Ministry. So this basically means the fact that they do not know about it is inaccurate. And if we continue to believe that this is the case, then it means that they are far weaker than we all give them credit for. This actually means that Afghanistan has turned into a narco criminal drug state, which is actually harboring terrorism as a measure of giving a protection to all what is what we call as illegal spectrum, what the world sees as a narco criminal terrorism nexus. Now, if this is the case, then it's even far more troubling, because in that case, what we're dealing with is a state which is in total collapse. And if it is a state which is in total collapse and the state which does not know where it's going, what it wants to gain from it, then of course the issue is very different in nature. And then that case is not just about Pakistan, it's also about the world, it's also about regional countries, and it's everybody else who is involved with peace, stability, and economic development in this region. Now, this said, the biggest question is who's going to fund this war? Is this war going to be funded by the military contractors? Will it going to be funded by drug lords? Is it going to be funded by criminality? For Pakistan, the answer is no. So if India wants to fund terrorism in Afghanistan, so be it. Do they want to come and fight in Afghanistan? Do they want to provide and actually take care of this, regime of thugs and regime of, interlocutors which want to continue their, stint in power at the expense of the people of Afghanistan, at the stint of Afghanistan falling prey to terrorism? Then that's a choice. And in that case, unfortunately, the UN Security Council Resolution 1373 and 1267 will hold India accountable just as much for aiding and abating terrorism from regional proxies. And now these are some things which are going to haunt them in times to come, but this is something which they're not ready at the moment. But that is the reality on ground.
Uh, Apparently, we see that the Taliban regime is reluctant to give us, insurances in writing, because they do say that, okay, we will try to, but verbally they have been doing it for last 4 years, as you have mentioned, but they are not ready to give it in writing, as they did to the Americans, when they had signed an agreement in Doha in 2020. Um, um, so why they don't want to give us in writing?
There is a very big difference. You see, America was a power which was leaving Afghanistan. So they were negotiating actually a power vacuum decision. We are a power which is in country, capable of not only responding, but also meeting any challenge head on. So if they're going to divert on terrorism, we're not just going to pass another cruise missile attack on them. We're going to bring the war to their courtyard. And that is something which they have seen. This is something which they had not seen. They have just seen this in the last week or so when Pakistan responded back. That we had the intelligence, we had the capability, we had the will, and we had the national decision to go after the terrorists. Between those lines, now the decision and the choice for them is to understand that Pakistan means business. Pakistan is not at all in a mood to allow Afghanistan to blackmail us on terrorism, India to use Afghan territory for terrorism against Pakistan, continue to have uh, terrorist acts in Pakistan, and why? And why should Pakistan be paying this price? Because India lost its war in Banyan al-Marsus. They lost the war. They couldn't defend India. So now they want to come and use Afghanistan as a launch pad. And if the Afghan regime actually believes that this is going to lead to their survival, they're sadly mistaken. because India is not United States of America. India is not going to give the Afghan regime billions and billions of dollars and not hold them accountable. They're a very different people with a very different mindset. And let's not forget, um, there are lots of things which Pakistan can still do, which we haven't done. The fact of the matter is this Afghan transit rate, just to give you statistics over here, it's around $75 billion a year. And out of that, Pakistan only gets 500 billion. So this basically means the entire illegal, undocumented economy of Afghanistan is actually linked to trade with Pakistan. So if Pakistan closes that border, Pakistan rethinks on all of these issues, the Afghan regime or the Afghan group in power will have big difficulty in terms of managing the expectations and perceptions of the people on ground and also to maintain their rule forever. Now, second question is the continuous aid of the Americans, which are coming from the Department of Defense for the Afghan National Army. But as we all understand that the Afghan National Army has been dismantled. So this money is going to Department of Defense, from the Department of Defense to the Afghan Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Interior. Now, in this case, if it is linked that this is now being used for supporting terrorism, the United States is also going to rethink. If the US weapons are used against Pakistan or any other regional country for regional terrorism, then there is also a big question mark because this is not what military weapons are left for. And already Pakistan has raised this issue. Already the GOA of the United States has also come up with similar reports, which have said that actually this is the situation on ground. So what we are saying is based on facts. What we are saying is based on reality. The only problem is this time the reprisal for all of this is going to come in a very different way. And that is what the Afghan regime is not ready to, abide by.
Ma'am Maria, how you see the role of Turkey and the Qatar in the entire process?
Mr. Waheed, Turkey and Qatar have been extremely forthcoming. They have really, really put their heart and soul in terms of actually trying to build peace in the region. They have tried the Taliban, interim government to come and talk seriously with Pakistan so that there is not much more violence or any such thing. But unfortunately, despite their repeated, attempts to mediate, it has landed into the failure of the talks. And despite the fact that there is resumption of talks, we are not very hopeful because there seems to be, an underlying mindset. They believe that they can actually prolong these discussions. And we're not sure why they want to do that. Is it because they want to come up with an East-West two-front war scenario with Pakistan? And in that case, because there happens to be a military drill also happening on Pakistan's eastern front. So is it because they want that we remain engaged, hopeful, and we're not already on a war footing kind of a scenario on the western and eastern front, or maybe there's something else which they're cooking up against Pakistan? So we're not sure because this seems to be a strategic temporary pause. It doesn't seem to be something which is actually motivated by a real attempt to actually have a conversation with Pakistan. Because if it was the case, then they should have agreed to the draft on which they had negotiated 4 days and 4 times. And what we saw in the end is that they just, walked up and, somebody had a conversation with them from Kabul, and they just withdrew from it. So the fact is this, that there is something else which is under the wraps, maybe a terrorist attack, maybe in India planning something, and then after that, it's like they're hedging to maybe protect something else because there seems to be no reason, one, for them not to sign this, and two, for them to delay these talks, and three, then to have the resumption of talks.
How you see the role of China and the Russia in the entire, Pakistan, Afghanistan situation?
Well, it is true they want to have rapprochement with the Taliban regime, but at the same time, both these countries are very clear, both China and Russia, that they will not stand for military contractors such as ISIS, such as EDM, such as TTP, and such as other terror organizations actually operating out of Afghanistan. That is something on which the region is actually unanimous in thought. So that is something which they're misreading. Of course, Pakistan also enjoys an excellent relationship with Russia, excellent relationship with China, and also with the SCO countries. So in this case, there is a very thin line which the regime is actually working on. So despite the fact that right now the Russians and the Chinese seem to be quiet on it, but one thing is for sure, they are on one page when it comes to the fight against terrorism.
Do you see any threat from the Indians because they are going to have a election next month in Bihar, and
Yeah.
that's why the Indians have been, issuing a very uh, uh, a kind of irresponsible statements, creating another situation in this South Asia.
You've hit the nail on the head. We believe that it's actually India behind even the delays. Maybe either it is linked to some kind of economics support which they want to get from India. Maybe it has got to do with some kind of terror activity which they need to unleash on Pakistan. Or there is something else which is cooking up. Because one thing is for sure, there seems to be no tangible reason for them not to sign something which they had negotiated for 4 days and then to have resumptions again. Because nothing on ground has actually changed. So what is it that first led them not to sign it and then later on ask them to renegotiate and to come back on the negotiating table? So we are anticipating some kind of a misadventure from India, and we believe that Afghan proxies could also be used. Now the question is that what does the Afghan regime want? Do they want to side with peace or do they want to side with war? That is a decision that's going to be made by them. One thing is for sure, the ally they're backing on is not capable of actually fighting a crisis or fighting a war. They're very good in Bollywood, they're very good on the media, but actually fighting the war is something else. And let's not forget something which most people mistake. That is that this Taliban regime, which is in power, which is actually calling the shots, such as Wasik and others, they left Afghanistan while Afghanistan was, coming and going through all these phases. So the actual average fighter who's paid is somebody else. The fighters and the people who are coming up with this political, saber rattling, this very hardcore brinksmanship has not actually fought the war for that long. So the perception and reality are two different things. The perception of war, the perception of leadership, and the ability to actually sustain a war on your own ground is something else. And then a war which you're going to thrust on another country is something else. You see, this is a war which they're thrusting on Pakistan. Pakistanis, Pakistani armed forces, Pakistani people, Pakistani government, we will fight for every inch of Pakistan's sovereignty and for every drop of blood because we're fighting for our people. The Taliban regime is right now acting as a regional murderous proxy for terrorism. Now, there's a big difference. If you're money for hire and if you're terrorism for hire, the price check is very different. The rationale is very different. The morale is very different. And the ability to have continuous people to rally around that is very different. Because it's okay if it's a small group, but it's very different when there's a whole cost to be borne by the entire nation. And unfortunately, right now, the Afghan nation, the Afghan people are facing the outcome of Afghanistan's territory being used for terrorism.
Before departing, last question today. Army chief and the field marshal held a meeting with the tribal elders in Peshawar, and it was a very good meeting. But we have been seeing a different kind of statements coming from the provincial government. Uh, they don't agree with the policy that the federal government is following at the moment, and especially regarding the operations which are going on inside KP. So, what is your assessment of that, and how we can have a unanimity of views between the federal government as well as the provincial government regarding Afghanistan?
I think one thing is for sure, we need to understand that Afghanistan is a foreign country. I think we all agree on that. So, in this case, foreign policy and defense policy, when it comes to regional threats, bilateral threats, is always decided from the federal standpoint and federal vantage point. Because anything which is becoming a threat to Pakistan's national security becomes that. Of course, the provincial governments have a say, but the provincial governments have a say in terms of putting their people first.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maria, the Director General SASI, expert of the regional, the foreign and the regional situation and issues. Thank you very much for joining me today.